What's going on, everybody? And welcome into the 110th episode of the Crazy One podcast. As always, I'm your host, Stephen Gates, and this is the show where we talk about creativity, leadership, design, and a whole lot of other stuff that help to empower creative people. Now, as always, remember, you can listen to the shows, get the show notes, and also be sure to check out the new content I've been making for the Crazy One YouTube channel. And you can find all of that. Just head over to thecrazy1.com. It's thecrazy and the number 1.com. Remember, hit the subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform to get the latest episodes whenever those come out. And if you have any questions, you just want to sort of keep up with my adventures, get some different content than what I do here on the show, you can either follow me on Twitter or Instagram, and you can follow the show on LinkedIn or Facebook. Now, last year at How Design Live, I'd started to do something different. And what I wanted to do is that every year at that event, I wanted to sort of look back over the past year and really sort of bring what I thought were the people who were the most interesting, the most inspirational, the funniest, the people who sort of are having a really big impact on me, and bring them to the event for a conversation. And you'll see in one of the past episodes, last year's was with Sina Mosaeb, who is an ex-IDEO member out of San Francisco, and Greg Larkin, the author of the book, This Might Get Me Fired. And I think it was a great conversation around what is innovation, how do you do it. If you missed it, go back and check it out. Sina has an analogy about how creating innovations like playing Super Mario Brothers that I think is just brilliant. But this year, I wanted to do something different. And again, try to bring a voice that maybe a lot of people haven't heard or don't have access to or things like that. And I didn't have to look very far because about 3 years ago, I did a piece of work that I think since then has gotten more questions, more outreach about than anything else. And that was some work that I did with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame band Metallica. It was, I don't know how to describe working with them and their team. I think it was fun, it was challenging, it was inspirational, and candidly, I think unexpected in the best possible way. And that what I thought I was going to find in this band that had been around forever, that had such an influence on culture, an influence on design, I mean, you can't walk down the street without seeing somebody wearing a Metallica t-shirt, that I was going to find this sort of like egotistical rock and roll, like, you know, stereotypical, I don't know what, I'd watched one too many Cameron Crowe series or something. And what I found was something that was so completely the opposite. And it was such the thing of like, I just want to take designers and teams and leaders and sit them down and have them look at the band and how they operate, because I think they have been at the top of their game for 40 years for a reason. If you look at the way that they work with their team, the way that they have an opinion, but they also really listen to people and will sort of concede the lane to an expert because they're just like, look, you know, we trust the people who are around us. If you look at how their creative process probably is, I think, the purest version of divergent and convergent creative thinking and creation that I've maybe ever seen, it just was something that I think an experience I'm still sort of catching my breath from. So what I wanted to do was to sit down for this interview that's going to be in this episode with a guy named Marc Reiter. And Marc has been with the band for about 30 years. He has a career that spanned through Sony Music and Q Prime Management, and now for the past 4 or 5 years has worked as the full-time manager and I guess chief creative guy for the band. And I think, you know, this is a guy who, whenever you go to his LinkedIn profile, I think it says head pot washer or something funny and dismissive like that. But if you know him, this is a guy who's won multiple MTV Music Awards, who's had a huge influence on a lot of creative for bands like Pearl Jam and Metallica, and created some really, really, you know, important work. Couldn't be more humble, couldn't be more friendly. So what I wanted to do is to sit down and just have a conversation with him, to talk about his career, to talk about the band, how they work, and to give a little bit of a behind-the-scenes look into all of that, because it's a world not many people get to be able to see. So I hope that you find it as interesting and inspirational as I did. I hope you check out some of the videos and the documentary and some of the things that we talk about, because I know that it may not seem like, well, yeah, if I'm, you know, doing anything but music, I could learn from these guys, but trust me, you can. So here is my conversation with Marc Reiter, the chief creative guy of Metallica, from How Design 2020. So I think for those of you who've been around How for any amount of time, I think every year I try to sort of go through and look at the last year or so and kind of say, hey, look, what are some of the most interesting people that I know who are doing some of the most interesting things, and be able to sort of come to How and have a conversation with them. about, actually, I think 3 years ago this week, I got an email from a friend of mine who said, hey, we have like this branding project we're working on for a client that I can't talk about on a time frame that I can't give you, for a thing that we think is going to be challenging, but this could be right up your alley. Do you want to be a part of it? And I said, look, honestly, like, I am super burnt out. I don't think I'm in the mood to be able to do this. And he sort of wrote me back and he was like, look, I think this probably is going to be something you are going to want to do. I agreed to it, and about a month later found myself in a conference room in Soho with what turned out to be a project for Metallica to be able to create what would become Blackened Whiskey. And at that point, that was the first time that I met Marc Reiter, who we have got here, who's here with us today. And I think, Marc, you've got to, I think, probably have, for me, what is one of the funniest, and I guess probably appropriately one of the most rock and roll LinkedIn profiles, as according to that, you spent 24 years as the plumber at CRZY and then have spent the last 4.5 years as the pot washer for Metallica. So I think probably just by way of introduction, just tell us a little bit about yourself, like what you've done, because you've been in music, restaurants, all sorts of different things.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you, Stephen. I'm honored and flattered to be here, and very happy that you couldn't find anyone else to to join you. Yeah, so my story is my journey is long and laborious. I guess my 10,000 hours started in upstate New York, listening to the radio and not really being able to do very much else other than love music and skateboard. And those, I realized that I wasn't going to make it as a pro skateboarder, so I better figure out and I couldn't play an instrument, so I better figure out something else to do. So I started working in record stores and then parlayed that into an internship at a record company and did 9 years at Sony Music and had an amazing time, and was very fortunate enough to meet Cliff Bernstein and Peter Mensch at CRZY Management, and they picked me out of Sony Music in 1992, and I did, as you said, 24 years there. I claimed to be a plumber there. I don't know why really, but I remember friends of mine that were in the financial world, whenever they would be out at bars and people would say, what do you do for a living? They would always say they were plumbers, because it sounded a lot more interesting than saying they were stockbrokers or financial people. And so I just put that down. And anyway, I did that for a number of years. And one of our biggest clients was Metallica, and I had the pleasure of working very closely with them. And about 5 years ago, they started making inquiries about perhaps working directly one-on-one with them. And it was at a time when my wife and I were about to become empty nesters, with our daughters both going off to college or finishing college. And we decided that it was time for a change, and uprooted from the East Coast and moved out, loaded up the truck and moved to Berkeley. And that was that. And so now here we are out west working with one band instead of 20 bands. And there you have it.
Well, so just for everybody's benefit, what exactly does the chief creative guy for Metallica do?
Whatever they want.
I should have seen that answer coming.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, it's the greatest thing about Metallica, and there are many great things about them, but you don't get to have a nearly 4-decade-long career as vastly successful as they've had without consistently breaking the mold and breaking down barrier after barrier the way they have, and that that comes with being mavericks as they are, but also making a lot of challenges creatively, and that for someone that has a hint of creative muscle, or a hint of creativity the way I'd like to think I do, although like I said, I can't play an instrument, but I like to think that I've got some ideas in my mind that can help further an artist's career. That is so stimulating, and that it's so motivating. So when I was at CRZY, we had, as I said, we had a lot of artists that we worked with, and they were all fantastic to work with, but To have an artist of Metallica's caliber and at their stature, and to be able to walk into a meeting with them or just sit down with them and say, okay, so here's what we're thinking, and you just come up with the most outlandish ideas. And normally, you go to a younger band and come up with these really crazy ideas. The older bands are normally, and I don't say older in age, I just mean older as in more established and ones that have been around for a little longer. Normally, they're at the point where they want to play it a little safer. They may even be interested in starting to think about taking a victory lap, so to speak. These guys, you go in and you come up with the craziest ideas, and the guys in Metallica, they were just that band. They would look at you and say, well, that's a pretty crazy idea. Has anyone ever done that before? And you normally I would say no, and they go, great, let's do that. So again, just they would constantly challenge me and challenge everyone at Q Prime, but mostly they were always challenging me to come up with bigger, greater, more unique ideas, and they still do. So that's case in point, Blackened, which you and I worked together on, was something that I'm pleased and proud to say that I had a lot to do with the concept and initial concept of. I mean, it took scores of us to execute it, but in coming up with that, it was like, hey, why don't we do a spirit? I think it's a great extension of who you guys are as a brand, and your fans are a lot of your fans are very into whiskey and the spirits world, and we just think it would be really great. And there obviously are a lot of challenges with that, obviously due to a couple members of the band being sober, but this is more about the fans than it is about the band. But why don't we start doing that? And as soon as you say that, they don't just say, yeah, that's great, let's do it. They start asking the tough and challenging questions that go so deep and so in depth about themselves and about their brand, and about just more challenging things than you're ever going to get from anybody else. And that's again what makes them so unique and so incredible to work with. Sorry,
No,
did
and
I just take up the entire half hour with that?
wait, nah. Well, no, but for me, I think, like for me, just sort of coming into the process, I mean, it's amazing because, to sort of what it is you talked about, there were so many like leaders or CEOs who I just almost want to sit down and show them the way that you and the band work, because look, I think I definitely came in with a preconception about, look, this is a band that's been around for 40 years and the rock, like there is so much that you would expect ego, you would expect like all these sort of things. And for me, I mean, it sounds weird almost to say, right? I was so blown away by how nice everybody is, how invested everybody is, how there is, I think everybody has a very strong sense of opinion, but
Mhm.
at places, again, there is that, look, we understand that people have been brought in to be an expert and we should let them be the expert. And to me, it's like, you really, and that's why I said, for me, having seen the business workings or even the insanity that is a tour or something like that, there is something very different and special where you can see that that's sort of why the success has gone on and come out of that for so long.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you've just kind of surmised in 45 seconds what just took me about 9 minutes to say. But that is, yeah, I think the bottom line is, you know, um, you don't get to be who you are, who Metallica is, and where Metallica is at this point in their career without them being, they're assassins at what they do. And they are assassins because of the music and the art that they've created over all these years. But I think they stay where they are because they also hire assassins.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that, and I think that's such, yeah, I think just that dedication to that, and we'll get back to that more in a second. But I think one of the things that I found utterly fascinating, which, so again, as I exist in the world of business and efficiency, and obviously that exists there too. One of the things that we've talked about and even sort of joked about, I think, is the band's almost famously inefficient creative process and how they make music and sort of how they approach it. And so I just wanted to see if you could just sort of describe that for people, or sort of talk about whenever they do make music, how does that work? Because I'm guessing it's probably different than what a lot of people think that creative process would look like.
Yeah, well, I've only been around it I mean, I've only been around it since just after they finished recording the Black album. So I've seen them record, but I mean, seriously, I've seen them record half of their creative output in terms of musical output. So I can't speak to, the first 5 albums, but which were recorded very differently because back then they were, they had a far lower budget and far less time to record them. They didn't own their own studio. So things were done much differently back in the day when they were younger, hungrier, and like I said, didn't have the luxury of their own recording studio, their own clubhouse to go into, and things like that. So the recording process is vastly different now than it was back in the day. But the way they do things now is different from many recording artists for a number of reasons, for a myriad of reasons. Namely the fact that, like I said, they've got their own studio, so they don't have to worry about, Justin Bieber is due in a week from Wednesday, so you've got to finish by Tuesday night at midnight because your gear is being loaded out at 11:59 p.m. Like I said, a week from Tuesday, or something like that. They've got the studio locked out for as long as they want it, so that they're free to create for as long as they want. There are no deadlines for the record's release. It'll come out when it's ready, and that kind of lack of deadline allows them to be as free as they want, as free as they wish to create. The other amazing benefit, and this is, this allows the artistic freedom that everybody I think wishes for, is the fact that they own their own record label. And again, that you want to talk about, not having anybody breathing down your neck. There's no record label saying, when's the record coming? Well, there is. I mean, I guess it's themselves, and they do put a lot of pressure on themselves. But at the same time, again, they are their own bosses, and that's wonderful. It is a blessing and a curse, but at the same time, they put their own pressure on themselves rather than some giant corporate entity saying, we need to make our quarter, so you've got to get this record out by Christmas or something like that. So those are all great benefits. At the same time, without having those kind of pressures, sometimes records take a little bit longer, and Metallica fans know all too well, because the most asked question from any fan is always, when's the next album? And anytime we put out a re-release, when we remaster the catalog and put it out, fans are very happy to get a new version of a previous release, a remastered version, or when we do a new project of any kind that's non-musical, fans are all too happy to see a collaboration with, Nixon watches or Vans sneakers or Blackened whiskey, for example. But fans are always like, yeah, that's great. When's the new album coming? So again, people always want new music. And oftentimes, some fans can sometimes get a bit frustrated to say, well, are all these other things that you're doing, are they distractions that are preventing new music? And the answer is no, they're not. They're just extensions of the band's creativity that, because there are times when they just can't make music as quickly as they want because it's not coming to you.
Yeah. No, and I think that's what I said. For me, it's a fascinating process. I think the other part of the process to me has been, I don't know, as I think about in music or anything else, I think a group of artists who have been so open about that process, right? I think obviously, Some Kind of Monster documentary comes to mind where you can see a younger incarnation of you as a part of that process. But I think, there is also, just like you said, making music over that sort of 40 years. I mean, is there, as you think about sort of teamwork or how to sort of keep that going, as they're sort of gone through that process, have there been any lessons or insights or things like that where you just kind of either that were surprising or that, again, were things that you always sort of thought and it just took a while to be able to figure out around how to stay that creative or even just sort of stay around each other for that sort of length of time?
No, that's a great question, but I don't know if there's really an answer to it.
Mm.
That because every you know they're all snowflakes. I mean, and I don't mean, and please don't let that be the takeaway from this session. That
I know.
Metallica.
I think that's the description of every creative in the world. So
That's what
I'm
I
sure
mean.
that's
Yeah,
definitely not. Yeah.
that's not Metallica or snowflakes, but everyone is we're all snowflakes. But really, I mean, what works for Metallica may not work for Ariana Grande, which may not work for Idols, this really cool punk band from England, which may not work for someone who's in their bedroom right now putting in their 10,000 hours to be tomorrow's next hip hop legend. So I just you can't say this is how you do it, because there's no formula for success. In music, in graphic arts, in filmmaking, in whatever. It's whatever works for you. And just to go back to the last question, because I don't think I really answered it properly, and I don't mean to take up too much more time answering older questions, but one thing that Metallica does that is very, very different in making their music is they take a series of riffs, and a lot of Metallica fans know this, but maybe a lot of maybe some of the 12 viewers that maybe have hopefully stayed with us don't know about how Metallica create their art. What they do is, rather than just like writing a song and playing it through and then honing it and turning that into one song on an album, Metallica tend to sometimes they do write that way, but what they tend to do is, throughout the course of months and months and months, they take a series of riffs. Riffs being these just these like short bursts of sound, and they record all these riffs, and over the course, like sometimes on tour before they go on stage, they practice, they jam before they go on stage, so when they go on, they're hot. It's like warming up before you race, or before you do anything, you tend to warm up, and that's what they do. But in the jam room before they go on stage, sometimes they record everything that they do. So sometimes they'll jam and they'll get a few riffs before they go on stage. Sometimes in the studio they'll come up with new riffs. So when they go in to start making a record, they've got hundreds and hundreds of riffs. And Lars, one of Lars's many talents is he's a fantastic arranger. I mean, an amazing arranger. And he also has a photographic memory. So Lars has this incredible ability with his photographic memory to say, remember that riff from Cincinnati in 2018? Let's go back and grab that riff. And there's another riff from Copenhagen in 2019 from the summer tour. Let's take those two riffs and try to combine them. And the engineer will go back and pull these riffs, and they'll put them together, and they'll like kind of Frankenstein the beginnings of a song. And then the band will play those riffs together. And lo and behold, you'll sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but you'll get the makings of a verse or a chorus, and then James will start writing lyrics to it. But they'll take that and they'll modify it into a song, and that's how a lot of their songs, at least since I've been involved, have started to come together. And these riff tapes, as Lars calls them, will start to create the makings of songs, and it's really a fascinating project. So I don't know how many rock bands do it that way, but it's pretty critical. It's almost like they're sampling themselves.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because for me, it was just, I'm always sort of a creative process junkie. And I think if anybody's interested, the band actually does put out YouTube videos for the making of a particular song. So you can actually sort of watch the evolution of it. But for me, it was sort of like that divergent thinking in its purest form of, let's just go do a bunch of stuff. We don't know where this is going. We're not sure what this is. And like I said, then we're just going to be able to go back and say, hey, what about this? Hey, what about? And the fact that just the way that that comes together. And I think, yeah, definitely Lars's orchestration of that. But yeah, I think that to me was such, that's why I say it's like we've all watched one too many movies or something about what that should look like or be like. So
Yeah.
I think for me, that was always fascinating. But you sort of talked before about, because I mean, look, this is a band that just even, if we just even look at since sort of COVID has happened, again, has put out a performance and a film with the San Francisco Symphony Orchestra, has done a drive-in concert, is doing a benefit concert this Saturday, has been, did a remote sort of version of a Blackened, which was, obviously the song. But there's just so much of, gee, I wouldn't expect that, but damn, it really worked. And so, I mean, I was sort of curious from your side, is like you said, whenever you take them ideas, how do either you think about like what would either be a good fit, or like how do we assess what is going to be different or innovative, or because that's why I said they're just such unexpected things that seem to happen so regularly. Something like is going on with all of you guys to be able to do that for such a length of time.
Well, I mean, I wish I could say that the ideas were all mine, but they're, a mere fraction of the ideas are mine. They're really, they come from everywhere, and oftentimes they come from the guys themselves, from the band themselves. But yeah, I mean, look, when we're sitting around during this craziness of the last 9.5 months, trying to figure out what to do, it's hard because, like I said, we're trying to figure out what to do when all we know is what we can't do. And what they couldn't do were the two things that they love to do the most, and that is play live or get together in the studio and jam or record from jams. So they've been trying to record a little bit remotely, and they've figured out a few things that they can do, but they were really just trying to say, well, what can we do? Our fans are clamoring for stuff, and we just don't know how to make this work. So the first thing that some of the team in the fan club that you know, Stephen, came up with was the idea for Metallica Mondays, which was really nothing more than, it was an amazing idea, but it was nothing more than just digging deep into the vault and pulling out some existing shows, live shows that many people hadn't seen before, but we had edited and just putting them up on YouTube for everyone to see. And again, it was something that we had stored away in the vaults. It cost us a little bit of money to remix them and to post them, but to us it was money very well spent. And all we did was YouTube and Facebook were very cool about posting them. They were also very cool about promoting them for us. And we asked fans to consider making a donation. Since they were free, we asked them to consider making a donation to the band's All Within My Hands Foundation, which the benefit that you mentioned is taking place for the foundation on Saturday. Please consider watching, everyone. Pay-per-view. Anyway, but we fans donated over $100,000 just out of goodwill. But anyway, we did this for 26 weeks, and it became like appointment viewing for so many people, and the numbers were insane, far beyond anything that we thought it was going to be, to the point where Facebook and YouTube were reaching out to us saying, you guys are the most watched, you're the most watched regular show on Mondays for us. And again, like that's not what we were hoping for, but it just happened by, just naturally. And all we were trying to do was just say to our fans, hey, look, we know we're not touring right now, but this is the next best thing. And this is something we do. And again, that came out of the fan club team sitting around with Lars, who also, helped come up with this, and saying, what can we give our fans who can't see us live and in person? What can we do? What's the next best thing? So, then the next thing was, okay, what else? What can we do now that, when COVID was starting to relax a little bit in the summer, and the guys felt comfortable getting together and trying something out, we came up with we didn't come up with the drive-in idea, but the folks at the company that had done the Garth Brooks and the Blake Shelton show had approached us and said, hey, do you guys want to do the first rock show? And we said, yeah, let's do it. And like I said, the band felt comfortable enough to do it. And we created this very, very tight bubble with very strict, quarantine rules. And it was a 40-person bubble, including the crew and everyone. And we pulled off this event. And again, it was very successful. We were very happy that we were able to do it. And that led to the band saying, hey, maybe we can actually do a little bit of recording, which they're at least jamming a little bit and trying to create some new music, because it's so pent up in them that they haven't been able to get together. So that's, at least they're writing, they're jamming, they're doing a little bit, but most of it's remote. But they just have to create. But it's almost like, necessity is the mother of invention. You feel that it's so necessary during these 9 months that you have to do something, or else you're going to lose it. If you're a creative person, and I'm sure, again, I don't mean to speak for the whatever audience we have right now, but I'm sure everybody feels that way, that you've got to do something. So you're going to figure out a way to do it, whether it's just running outside and creating street art, or you're going to do something if you're a creative.
Yeah. Well, so a couple more minutes left. So I'll prompt everybody that if you got any questions for Marc about anything like that, you can feel free to put them in the chat or the Q&A panel, and we'll get to those here in just a minute. But it does feel like a good place to sort of wrap up with that, which is thinking about customers, fans, those sort of things. That again, I think it's not an insignificant part of whatever it was, the Metallica Mondays, whether it's again, I've heard at one point that like even Spotify data gets used to start to influence some of like what's the playlist that the band might play whenever they go to a particular town. Or I think that there is a lot of that that is definitely sort of a part of that with that. So what is that relationship, or like I said, how much of that is looking to them or drawing for them, and how much is sort of like, hey, we think this is something they're going to want, and sort of how do you balance the two?
I'm not sure I understood that question.
So what I'm saying is, so I think there are things you can definitely say, hey, the fans want X. Let's give the fans what they want. Versus I think there are other times when I don't know that you ever would have gone to the fans and said, hey, I'm not sure that they want us to go play with a symphony orchestra. So a sort of balancing, knowing that there's a very, very passionate fan base that has some very, very strong opinions of how much do you listen to that versus how much of, hey, look, we're going to try to do something a little bit different from that.
Great question. So good that I didn't understand it.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah. So no, but that's a great question, and you know what? It is a fine line that the band. Look, the band have always had an amazing relationship with their fans since day one, and they've always taken the fans' opinions into account. The thing is, they have an incredibly large legion of fans. So those fans have a very have differing opinions. The fans don't think as one. Hopefully they think as one in terms of their love for the band, but not in terms of their love for the 140 song catalog that the band has, or where the band's going to play next and everything else. But in terms of like what direction the band are going to go in, or what set lists, for example, things like that. It's a fine balance, as I said. For example, you mentioned Spotify. That's a factor in determining some of the set lists that they'll play in a particular market. But it doesn't dictate the entire set list. Again, Metallica fans know that Lars is the one who helps put the set list together. So what he'll do is he'll look at local radio, the local rock stations playlist, and what Metallica songs they play, and then he'll look at the local Spotify playlist as well, because you can do both of those things. I mean, obviously you can see the rock station in Champaign, Illinois, and see what they play, and you can also look at the Quad Cities Spotify playlist. So both of those determine what people in that part of Illinois listen to for Metallica. So in a way, you are getting the requests of Metallica's fans in that region. So you're finding out what their favorite Metallica songs are. So Lars will take that information and he'll see okay, based on that, I know that these are the top 20 Metallica songs in that part of Illinois. He'll then go back and look at the playlists from the last time Metallica played in that part of Illinois. And he'll go, okay, we played all those songs. I don't want to repeat the same exact songs, so I'm not going to play everything the same. And then he'll say, okay, but I have to play a couple of the, as we like to call them, the toe tapping favorites, because Metallica don't have greatest hits. So it ends up being a melange of different, of different factors that contribute to something like the set list. And I use that example, number one, because you brought up the set list, for example, but it also serves as an example for every decision that Metallica makes. You take all of these factors and you put them all into a pot and you make the stew, so no one factor becomes the lone decision maker, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I think that it does. And that's what I said. I think I think that was definitely, at least for me, I had no idea of just how much I think goes behind because you're just showing up to the show and it's like, oh, they just go on stage and play. And it's like, yeah, no, there's so much more that goes into
and
that.
also, what I didn't say is, also if there's a new album to promote, which oftentimes there is, but not always. Sometimes the band just say, hey, you know what? We're in between records. We're in the studio. We're really bored. We're going to go out and tour right now. So there isn't a new album to promote. But if there is, you also want to promote songs from the new album. So you're going to throw in 3, 4, sometimes 5 new songs to play that they've never played before in that city. So like I said, there are many factors in deciding which songs that are going to get played in a set list. But fans should know that, Lars doesn't take one set list lightly. He takes them all very, very seriously, and the band too. The other thing is he takes James's vocals into consideration. He's not going to play 5 songs that are going to make in a row that are going to make James's voice strain so that he can't finish the tour off. And there's all these different factors, and it's a lot of work.
Yeah. No. So yeah. And so I'll say, yeah, if anybody has any questions for Mark or stuff like that, throw them into the Q&A. If not, I'll definitely keep going. So I'm curious for right now, like what have you been doing, or like what's been sort of keeping you creative, motivated, like just, again, in such this crazy time where everybody sort of feels like they're kind of off doing their own thing. What have you been doing to try to stay sane, or is that even a possible concept?
Well, staying sane is an impossible concept, but staying busy is not. And something. I mean, look, like you, I think, and like a lot of people, we're trying to think, a minimum of 6 months ahead, and sometimes as many as 12 or 18 months ahead. So a lot of the ideas that I'm working on are much further along in their conceptualizing and if not in their development. So I'm trying to think of things that we're hoping to do next summer, next fall, and beyond. And we've got a couple of ideas that are in the hopper that I could tell you and I could tell the audience, but I'd have to kill them all. So
let's maybe not go down that route, but yeah.
And then look, there's always extensions. I mean, listen, it's no secret that we're remastering our entire catalog, and as someone who's one of my chief responsibilities is helping to run the band's record label, Blackened, and so we've released the first 4 albums of the band's catalog, and next up is would be the next record in that catalog. And so that's and while we do that, we're also already working on the one after that and the one after that, and so we're always working on those. And there's a big box set that always comes when we do a remaster, and the box set which sells the least number is always the most work, and the most fun, because that's the, as we like to call it, that's the kitchen sink. That's when you put everything from that project into it, and the hardcore fans like the box set the most, and it's got everything in it, and Lars likes it the most. And funny thing is, he puts the most work into it with us because he is Metallica's biggest fan. So he is the most involved in it, and the rest of the guys, they look at it briefly, but it's really fun because when the box set comes out, the other three guys, like, they kind of see it sometimes for the first time. So they go through it and they love the box sets as much as the fans do, because they kind of really open it up and get into it for the first time.
Yeah.
So it's just a little secret there.
No, but that's what I was gonna say. I think, but that's that's why I mean, I would encourage a lot of people. To me, I think it is, whether it's through the videos on YouTube or the documentary, like those sort of things. It's just, for me, as I think all of us are trying to figure out, how do we be more creative? How do we get our team to work? How do we stay successful sustainably? How do we? I think there is so much there that, to me, I think was constantly fascinating. I think there are few groups of people that I've worked with that I feel like I've had such a sustained positive reaction to being so welcomed and to be so collaborative and to be like it. It is so fantastic. But like I said, I think there's so much for so many people to learn from, because that experience is so rare. But as for me, it's always talking about, that the work is the truth, right? Whenever you have that, the work that comes out of it is definitely a result of that. And again, none of you guys have been successful for that long by mistake. So well, I know it's early there out in the West Coast, so thanks for getting up to be with us today and to kind of go through everything. I know.
Yeah, no questions.
Definitely. What's that?
No questions?
No, I don't know. I don't know if everybody's. We got a whole bunch of people out there, but nobody's asking any questions. So I don't know. You're just either you're that good or you're that into. I don't know. That's what I said. I would think.
Come on, bring it on.
Somebody. That's what I say. We're just going to stay on here until somebody has a question for all of this. For somebody. Somebody? Anybody? That's what I was going to say. I don't. Oh, okay. Oh, there we go. And so the funny part is the first two questions are exactly the same question. So the funny part is, what is your favorite Metallica album?
Wow. The last one I listened to.
Oh, come on. That's a cop out.
Yeah, that's really a great question. I don't know if I really do. I would say probably Master of Puppets.
So for me, I definitely have, like, whenever you worked at hotel, when I worked at Starwood, I was like, what's your favorite hotel? It's like, well, it depends on my mood. Right. I know the next question from Chad, I know you're definitely probably not going to go near, which is, which is your favorite member of the band? Yeah. That's going to get a smile and a non-answer. I know.
Yeah. Definitely the last one I spoke with. No, it's funny going back to that favorite album. Yeah, it's probably Puppets, but I really love the first S&M record too.
Yeah,
it's a really special album.
Well, that's what I say. I think it's always a little bit of like, it depends on your mood and some of the stuff like that. So there's the predictable, can I get backstage passes? So the answer to that is no.
Yeah, the answer to that is no.
Yeah, again, it's interesting. So a few similar ones, if not Metallica, who would you want to work with? Are there any other up and coming artists or any other bands you'd love to work with?
Yeah, there's the punk band that I mentioned from England called Idols that I love. IDLES, unbelievable band. Another really cool punk band called Fontaines DC that I'm loving right now. And there's this really amazing indie band called Diet Sig that I love. Diet Sig are a two-piece band, and I just love everything they do. Now these bands all have really great management, and I wouldn't ever want to poach them. I'm just saying, like, if I could work with anyone, those are the bands that I would want to work with. I just think they're all really incredible. I love their energy, and they're amazing.
So Bob wants to know, how long did Blackened take to develop, and who was the distiller?
The Blackened took a couple years to develop. The master distiller was a gentleman named Dave Pickerel, who was the master distiller behind Whistle Pig Rye, also Hill Rock Bourbon, and Hill Rock, right?
Yeah.
Stephen? Yeah. And was the former master distiller at Maker's Mark for many years. Dave was a legend and an amazing guy. and a friend to everyone. I mean, he was a consultant for over 100 brands, too many for me to remember or to mention. But he was one of the most beloved men in the whiskey business, and our whiskey launched Labor Day weekend of 2018. Dave came up with the idea of the black noise, which was the idea of using Metallica's music to enhance the flavor by shaking the barrels with the low frequency Metallica music and having it agitate the barrels enough that the whiskey would seep into the barrels and get the flavor of the wood some more. And that was a patent pending technology that Dave had come up with. And he was just a scientist with an amazing palate. Like he had all of the traits that everybody in the whiskey business wanted. He was a remarkable guy. He launched our whiskey, like I said. He went out and promoted the hell out of it. And unfortunately, in early November of 2018, less than 2 months after he helped us launch the whiskey, he suffered a fatal heart attack and left us way too soon. And we miss him every day. But I'm happy to say, as tragic as that was, we have a new master distiller by the name of Rob Dietrich, who is a wonderful guy, and he has some huge shoes to fill, but he is filling them more than ably. And Rob came to us from Stranahan's Whiskey, and he lives in Colorado, not far from James. He is worked in the music business for a little while years ago, served our country in Iraq a number of years ago, so he's a veteran, and we absolutely love Rob, and he is killing it for us. So that is our new master distiller.
Awesome. Well, Sharon wants to know if there's free samples for everybody who attended. And Sharon, I can tell you that you can go to the website to see where you can buy Blackened near you. You can order it online, and if you go to the place and they don't have it, tell them to get it. Last question that seems like a good one comes from Chad. So he wants to know, what was your most challenging creative Metallica project?
I would say S&M 2, last year's album and film. Working with a symphony is never easy because of the musicians' unions, and working with the symphony themselves is wonderful. Working with the behind-the-scenes team and the lawyers and the unions and everything else is never easy. The musicians were fantastic. The conductors were unbelievable. It was a great project that way, but getting the approvals to actually release the film and the album was the greatest uphill challenge that I've ever had in my career. That and yeah, I'll leave it at that. I would say back in my days at the record company and at Q Prime, there were other artists, not Metallica, that were challenging. Would be the greatest understatement you could ever use.
I think we'll keep an eye out for the autobiography at some point. Whenever you feel like there's you and Eric and a few people on the crew that I think at a certain point, whenever you're decided to be done, the books are going to be spectacular. But I'd also say, look, there's plenty of people who, Mark, if you ever need any designers, I think there's a lot of people who definitely seem to be stepping up and wanting to be a part of that. But like I said, I just want to thank you again for showing up today and sharing all this stuff. And
thank you, Stephen. It was really an honor.
No, of course. And so, yeah, definitely, like I said, check out the benefit concert that the guys are doing is going to be this Saturday. And like I said, it definitely is worth going through a lot of those videos and some of the behind the scenes stuff, because it just, you really get a sense of, again, just I think how human they are, how, again, that real commitment to, I think, a lot of the things that we sort of aspire to in a lot of our teams, and to see it come to life in the results, there's a ton to be inspired by there. So thanks so much, Mark.
All hail the crazy one.
Thanks, man. We'll see you soon.
Thanks. See ya.
That was my conversation with Marc Reiter from How Design 2020. I think that there's just, it's like I said, I think, inspiration can come from a lot of different places and a lot of different sources whenever you sort of open up to it. And especially for somebody like me that's such a creative process junkie, to be able to sort of watch how they work and to be able to do so much of that. That's what I said. I think there's a ton that people can learn from whenever you sort of look to different places. So, look, as always, you can find out more about the show, find some related articles, find the show notes, and again, all the new content that I've been doing on YouTube. Just head over to thecrazy1.com. It's thecrazy and the number 1.com. As always, remember, hit the subscribe button. Do me a favor. Take just a couple of minutes. Leave a review. Follow me on social media. And look, everybody all in down in legal always wants me to remind you that the views here are just my own. They don't represent any of my current or former employers. These are just my own thoughts, and as always, I say it every time because I mean it every time, but thank you for your time. I know that time is truly the only real luxury any of us have. I'm always incredibly humbled you want to spend any of it sitting here listening to me. So, I think, hopefully, I don't know what, go out, buy a t-shirt, listen to some live music, go crank it up in the car and drive around, do something to be able to find some inspiration and some power, and as always, stay crazy.